everyone. My name is Juniper. I'm the managing producer for Feldenkrais Access, and I'm so happy to be here today with Maggy Burrowes. Maggy is talking about her upcoming workshop, The Secrets of Your Ring Muscle System, which will be June 17th. And we have some questions, and we're also taking questions, so please do write in. Maggy, is there anything you'd like to say before we get started?
I do want to apologize that I've got a bit of a cold and I'm a bit snuffly. And I'm looking forward to answering questions. And I love this work. It's very it's very global. It's very much about the whole self in action, which is what I love about Feldenkrais. So I'm looking forward to taking everybody's questions.
Awesome. Our first question was written in advance. Someone wrote in asking, I know the ring muscle system includes the sphincters, which are involved in controlling the ways we expel waste. Can you explain what the other ring muscle system parts are?
I can, and it's a very complex and interrelated system. So we can begin right here where you can see your irises are sphincters that open and close. The eyelids are sphincters that open and close. The structures around the eye that control the movements of the eye are sphincters that are in charge of things like blinking and our eyes closing when we go to sleep. But what's interesting about the eyes is they're very manageable by us. We're very able to do things on purpose with our eyes. So they're a great route in to some of the other sphincters. Now, the nostrils aren't sphincters. They do open and close, but not in quite the same way. But the lips are sphincters. Inside here, structures that are vital for controlling how we swallow, how we make sure that the food goes down the back and the air comes in and out the front. That area there has 3 different sphincters at the entrance to the airway, and they're all very important for singers and very interesting to talk about. And then we have the sphincter that prevents the acid of the stomach coming up into the esophagus, the one that can often cause a lot of trouble, and one of the things that I hope will be beneficially affected by the workshop if anyone has any problem like acid reflux. And then all the way through the digestive system, not just at the end, but all the way through, there are various sphincters. But this sphincter action, this closing and opening that happens all the way through our system, is coordinated with all the other sphincters, so that we have we can affect our circulation, the circulation of the blood, the circulation of the lymph. And the sphincters are part of our kind of internal pumping and organizing system. So what goes on in the diaphragms is also related to everything that's going on in the sphincters. So we'll be looking at how breathing interacts with these structures as well. The actions of the tongue as part of the breathing mechanism and part of the swallowing mechanism. So there's so many really exciting areas to look at that these structures are in charge of and vital for.
Thank you, Maggy. That's so inspiring. I'm really looking forward to it. And really nice to know that there's so much involved in this, that it can help a lot of different people.
Yeah, I believe it can.
Someone else wrote in, they write, I have incontinence and have been doing Feldenkrais lessons for a couple of years. Do you think this workshop will help?
I think it is very likely that the material I will be teaching will help, but I'm very aware of that there's an important element of classic Feldenkrais that we are constantly discovering and exploring new things. But as a singer, I'm also aware that if we want to get the full benefit of, turn something from a random event into a skill, it needs to be practiced. So what I'm delighted about with this particular course is there's going to be such a high quality recording, because I'm really confident that it can help with all of these sphincter functions, all the elements of the digestion, not just the waste, but that will require regular practice. like anything where we need to reverse something that's gone awry, we need to reboot the healthier response. That's what this workshop is all about. But I will be encouraging you all the way through to find the moments that you want to practice and engage with and do regularly in order to get the full benefit. Does that answer it, do you think?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one important thing is that it's not like a prescription, right? It's
really
how the person engages with it,
Yeah.
what their intentions are, and their attitude toward themselves, and how they engage with the work brings a lot to the experience. Is that true?
I think so. And when I was talking to you earlier, Juniper, I suddenly thought, yeah, you know, it is similar to the balance process, that we can improve our balance, but it requires regular attention in order to get the full benefit. But if we do attend to it, we can make very big improvements in our balance. I think this will be a similar thing. I think this is something that can be really improved with regular practice. The source of the basic information I'm working with was a woman called Paula Garborg, and her book called The Secrets of the Ring Muscles. And she certainly had very, very positive effects from encouraging people to practice the work. She didn't teach it in a Feldenkrais way. There were lots of do this 10 times, do this very strongly. And what I enjoyed doing was translating it into Feldenkrais processes that are much more geared to bringing out the natural instinct that the physical self has for well-being, to bring us back to a state of doing less and being more organized naturally without having to constantly focus on effort and struggle. I remember a few years ago reading that Kegels didn't really help people with how the pelvic floor functions. And it didn't surprise me because it looked like very strenuous work. And I had been doing Feldenkrais already for some time and knew that strenuous work wasn't necessarily what brought our whole system back into balance. Strenuous work can often pull us out of balance. So one muscle becomes too strong in relation to the others, and then they no longer talk to each other in such an integrated way. This workshop will be about reintegrating everything so that you can get your whole system working well. And what I would love is that people do practice and then give me feedback. That would be wonderful.
Something that's come to mind as you've been speaking, Maggie, is that, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, but hearing what you say about integrating our whole self and also seeing some of the questions that we receive and how I relate to my own self and my own health issues, I know that like I tend to think of if I have a problem, if I have a health issue, that's a part that to a large extent, doing Feldenkrais work is a way of like expanding the big picture and seeing how we work as an integrated whole and how we are a whole system organism within a bigger system organism of the world, that it's that isolating something that's not working is in itself a kind of like disconnect. Is that true?
I think that's very true. And, you know, the science of complex systems is way too complex for us to talk about without it sounding confusing and difficult. But actually, we know that, you know, that when we're feeling emotionally affected in some way, that it affects our physical well-being as well. We feel these interconnections. And if we just look at the physical, then we have a nervous system that goes through the whole self, a lymphatic system that goes through the whole self, a circulatory system that goes through the whole self. Feldenkrais focused on the skeletal system, not, I believe, because he had some peculiar idea about, you know, biomechanics that was very limited and narrow at all, but simply that he understood that it was something we could all focus on and sense and organize the whole self through. We could picture the whole skeleton very easily, much more easily than we can picture our circulatory system or our lymphatic system, or even the muscular system. And a lot of what's going on in the world is taking taking things apart, trying to fix the part, and then ramming it back into where it was before and hoping the rest of the system will be able to reintegrate with it. But Feldenkrais helps people integrate from the inside out. That's what it's all about. And that's why, I feel we are, part of what the 21st century needs.
I couldn't agree more.
Mm.
We just got a couple of live questions, one from DL Rankin on Facebook, who asks, how will this course help with digestion?
Well, again, it's very similar to talking about how it will help with expelling waste. Yeah, it's what's going on inside the digestive system is constant motion and undulation. Everything inside needs to be mobile. All our organs need to be mobile in order to function. And then what Paula Garbel claims, and what I've certainly felt working for me, is that you can then connect to the different sphincters on one system, which don't just include the digestive structures, but also the eyes, also the lips, also the throat, every part of the system, that you can re-engage them so that they get their rhythm back. And I think that they get that rhythm back, and that's what's going to help your well-being. But as I said before, with practice. So hopefully what you'll feel at the end of the workshop is a clear sense of what the benefits could be. And then you'll know where you want to begin to start to practice. And all the way through, I will do my best to highlight areas where I think this, if you practice this, it will be beneficial for this. That's my intention, is to put some guidance in there so that it isn't just 4 hours of material with no clear patterns to follow. And I will be producing notes for people as well, so they've got a written version that they can look at too. Do you think that covers the question?
Yes,
all I was going to say is, a lot of what goes wrong for us as we age is organs not functioning as well as they could. And just re-engaging with the organs as just as vital a system as the muscular system for our well-being, and taking that on board and engaging with it already just breathing well starts to help our organs to function better. And that's why it's going to be central to what we're doing.
I just wanted to say that this person had a sort of follow-up to their initial question, which is that their swallowing is not as strong as it was, and can it be improved through this work?
I believe so, and I will be addressing swallowing because I think it's very important. I think the functioning of the tongue in particular is very important for obvious things like swallowing, but surprising things like neck posture as well. So, we're going to be engaging in particularly that area. So I'm glad that came up, because I think, and I'm someone who has a condition called hypermobility. And one of the areas that I notice myself being a little lax and a little loose is in the swallowing. So it's been very helpful for me to work on the tongue work in particular in order to improve my swallowing.
That's awesome, Maggie. Really inspiring. We got a question from someone who's asking, at some point you mentioned being a singer and making use of ring muscles for this. Can you say more about singing and ring muscles?
Oh, yes, certainly. So, well, in fact, so starting at the obvious place, at the lips, and once we go back from the lips, we go in and down, and then we have inside the larynx, which is just here. I'm getting used to a new microphone. We're trying not to tap it by accident, make some awful noise. This area here has 3 different sphincter functions that protect your airway from what you're swallowing. So when you swallow, everything here lifts up and forwards so that the food can go back down the esophagus. When we sing higher notes, or louder notes, the larynx makes a similar movement. And consequently, singers need to learn to manage the entrance of the airway in such a way that they're not obstructing their voice with particularly the structures that just sit above the true folds. Now, I don't want to do too much of that because I can easily make myself cough, but that constricting action in here, singers need to learn to manage that and free it and open it up. And so this is not a voice workshop, but we will be exploring those sphincters and getting a sense of them and how they relate to allowing our voice to be clear and free and open and able to be loud and go higher with more ease. And then, of course, also the breathing rhythms. So all of the breathing rhythms that are part of it are also very important for singers, that the structures that manage the controlled exhalation, which is what we do when we sing, is control the exhalation, are in full coordinated working order.
Great. We got a question from someone about breathing, actually. Jillian from YouTube wrote in, and they are asking, I'm a paradoxical breather from birth who only learned this recently. I know this has affected my pelvic floor. I think that my tongue is being affected too. Is that likely a part of my apnea?
Oh, good question. Now, I think the apnea, what we address when we address how the tongue functions, we will also address the soft palate. Now, when I talk about sphincters, I usually mention diaphragms. And I think that's often a bit vaguer for people because they know they have a big diaphragm at the base of the lungs controlling the breathing. But they don't tend to think of these other areas as diaphragms. They have a diaphragmatic relationship. The floor of the mouth and the pelvic floor similarly anchor important structures to themselves. And the palate lifts up and down and moves very gently, very small amounts, but the soft palate at the back moves a lot more. And I believe that the problems with sleep apnea benefit enormously from improving the functioning of the soft palate at the back of the nose. So we will be looking at all of these internal structures, the inside of the nose, the back of the throat, the organization of the soft palate. And again, with practice, I would think that would be, you would feel very quickly, actually, the change in your breathing. I used to be, I think I had a paradoxical breathing habit. I was very asthmatic from my late teens until recently. And I think the breathing patterns that I will be teaching you have helped me enormously with my asthma. Never particularly had a sleep apnea problem, but I did have a mouth breathing problem, and that's responded extremely well to this particular process. So I now have a strategy that I can always employ. It's a bit difficult when you've got a cold, but even with a cold, I managed to breathe through my nose most of the night last night. And I practiced it a lot. This is the thing I practiced a lot. But when I've taught it to people, they enjoy it so much, they don't mind the idea of practicing it a lot. So I will teach you something that I would hope would be beneficial. But I do have other suggestions for that sort of thing. And they probably won't be time maybe to do a lot of chat in the, you're more familiar with how these workshops go than me, Juniper. I'm guessing that there might be time for questions during the workshop as well, so that after people have done something, will they maybe get a chance to ask me or tell me? Because otherwise, get in touch with me privately and I can happily talk to you more about this, or put a question up in the Facebook and I can put little links in there for you for things that can help with sleep apnea, because it's very important to deal with that.
The other thing to mention is that not everyone who will be joining us for the workshop will be able to be there live. So one nice thing about the Feldenkrais Access platform is that you're able to write a question under the post and the teacher can correspond with you that way. So anyone who has a question who's planning on joining through the recording, you can always correspond with Maggie in that way. You can also reach out YouTube and Facebook, but it is really convenient to do it via the Feldenkrais Access website because it allows us to see it more readily.
And then everyone can see the question, because sometimes people don't know they have a question until they see someone else asking it.
Yes, that's a really good point. As a lot of questions are answered for a number of people just by one person asking. So that's also really nice.
I always say to people, always ask your question because somebody else will want the answer too.
Yes, no doubt. We got one more question from YouTube from Lem, who's asking, have you noticed if exploring the sphincters has affected your day-to-day life? If so, how?
Well, so the most obvious thing has been the improvement in my breathing because of the asthma. But I think they give you a way to become more aware of the way your organs signal your emotional state to you. So over the last few years, as I've been concentrating very much on this internal work and this internal connectivity, I've also started to have a much stronger sense of my own gut instinct. I notice a lot sooner if something has knocked me a little off balance. I feel the feedback coming from my interoceptive system. I feel the information coming straight to me. Oh, something's not right. So I stop sooner what I'm doing and ask myself, what's not right? What am I not happy about? And get to solutions quicker for that reason. So I think this sort of sense of having a much clearer sense of what my organs are telling me, that's particularly noticeable. It isn't particularly a part of this workshop, but you will, as you play with this, start to sense your heart more clearly and what's coming into your heart, sense your gut more clearly. And when I think of the gut, I'm now tapping, which you can't see, my solar plexus area. But I think also deep. Often, if it's something that's actually causing you anxiety, you feel it deeper, you feel it deep in your belly. And all of those areas now, I can notice the tension and breathe into it and bring everything back into a state of equilibrium more quickly. So I would say that's the thing I've noticed the most. And then I had also had this interesting experience of going into menopause and instantly starting to have a slight sense of my bladder becoming unreliable, let's call it that. And I've had a very reliable bladder all through my life. And I say this because I went to an all-girls school. There were people who wet themselves laughing in their teens in my school. So, you know, I knew I wasn't that girl. I didn't tend to have problems with my bladder. And then the menopause came, and suddenly, if I coughed, I felt a little nervous. And of course, coughing is a sphincter action. So this sort of interrelationship between the sphincters were kind of signaling themselves. It's the same with something like sneezing. That's why it puts pressure on, because it's, you know, connecting the whole system and creating that pressure. And so I can't say it was only this. I do a lot of things for my health. But I have to say, I do call on the other sphincters to help manage something if I do feel that there's a problem. And over time, this, you know, and now I'm out the other side of the menopause for the most part. Maybe that's why I no longer have the problem. But certainly when people talk about incontinence in that way, they don't tend to suggest it reverses. And for me, it has reversed. So, you know, I think there are other things to look at. I don't think this work is the only thing you need, but I do think it's a very good start. And for me, it's been, apart from anything else, for me, it's fun. I like this work. I think you'll like it too.
That's one thing that really appeals to me about the Feldenkrais method is that the curiosity and exploration is built in, that it's not something that you have to force yourself into do because it feels so good and there's so much curiosity and investigation involved in the process.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We have one more question from someone who wrote in asking, they're pregnant and they are wondering if there are issues to consider about the ring muscle system in childbirth, and wondering if this workshop will help with childbirth.
Now, I think this is a very interesting question. I am childless. I've never given birth, so it's an experience I haven't had. But we will be including processes specifically intended to connect to and increase our awareness of and our understanding of how the pelvic floor functions. So I would be very surprised if anyone pregnant trying out this work didn't find it beneficial. We will be I think there's a lot of different things going on, aren't there, depending on which stage you're at. I will say that a lot of the workshop is on the back or the front, but I know that one of the wonderful things about the way Feldenkrais Access do these things is they will have someone demonstrating sitting in a chair. They will have people demonstrating in other positions so that you can get a sense of how to do it if you can't lie on your back. And I know sometimes pregnant women are advised not to lie on their back, so I'm not convinced that that's particularly problematic. Certainly, I think a lot of what we're going to do, you could do lying on your side. But in terms of just, again, that everything feels how it moves, that you have a clearer sense of your pelvic floor, clearer sense of its relationship to the front sphincter, the urethra, and the rear sphincter, the anal sphincter, and how that relates to all the other structures that are within the abdomen, and then having a clearer sense of how they connect to the diaphragm and how the diaphragm works. I would be astonished if it didn't, if it wasn't useful. We will be looking also a little bit, we won't do huge amounts of this, but we will do some looking at the way squatting is beneficial for the organs of elimination and the pelvic floor. So there'll be a little bit of that work in there as well. And that I'm absolutely certain is of benefit to anyone who's who's going to be having a baby. You know, part of the we don't get to just give birth in the fields, which is how everyone used to talk about it when I was growing up. So, oh, women used to just give birth in the fields, then go back to picking corn or whatever. But certainly, you know, I think in lots of places where people look towards natural birth, they encourage people to work from a squatting position rather than trying to give birth lying on their back. I think this is beginning to become better and better understood as we realize that, you know, there's some value to evolution. Some of the things we used to do are still worth doing. Yeah.
We have one more question that just came in, which is, can you say something about the vagus nerves connection to this workshop?
Right. So, yes, I can, though I do a lot of work separately that's about the vagus nerve. I guess that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because if people are interested in that, I'm prepared to address that more specifically in the workshop as well. My understanding of the vagus nerve is that we are able to utilize the way it functions to bring ourselves into a state of greater calm, which is what I think Feldenkrais work does anyway. If we engage with it in the way that we're encouraged to engage with it, very gently with ourselves, constantly listening to ourselves, allowing ourselves to rest whenever we feel like we've done too much, we feel a bit overwhelmed, we feel a bit tired, or even discomfort, all of those things being used as a signal to come back to a state of quiet rest. I think that's already beneficial. But I am also aware that there's something very interesting around the relationship between the voice and the vagus nerve. So Stephen Porges, who is the expert who brought our understanding of the vagus nerve into much more public arena, uses sound as part of the healing process that he explores. And my feeling is that we can make those sounds ourselves. And interestingly, some of those sounds are great for contacting the diaphragms in particular, including the pelvic floor. So I was planning to include a little bit of that, not necessarily a huge amount, but if I know that people are interested, I can include a little more. And then something very simple, like making a very vibratory, buzzy sort of sound, like just making a sound like that is doing several things. First of all, it's slowing down your exhalation. And slowing down your exhalation brings the vagus nerve into a greater state of calm. But it's also a complex sound. So if you listen to yourself making the sound, you're engaging even more deeply with what calms the vagal system. So to make the sound and to listen to the sound means that very simple chanting can be very beneficial. So I would say that the main connection between this workshop and that work is the breathing work, which we'll be looking at the way breathing connects to what we're doing in every segment of the workshop. But I think, we can include some of this voicey work as well. It can help us sense the pelvic floor, and it can give you a tool, a very simple tool, a meditation adjacent tool to bring yourself into a greater state of calm if you want to play with it. Yeah.
That's wonderful, Maggie. We just got another vote from someone on YouTube who wants to work with the vagus nerve during the workshop. So, at least two votes.
I've written quite a bit about that on my blog, on my website. So if people want to go to, it's just maggyburrowes.com, all one word. Spelling slightly unusual, Maggie with a Y, Burrowes with an E. They get changed a lot, but then if you do that, you won't find me. But on there, I've written a lot more about the vagus nerve, and we debated a lot which workshop we would choose, whether we do a voicey one or a sphincter one, and the sphincter one won. But maybe if this is successful enough, we'll get to do a voicey one, and then there's a lot of vagal work in the voice work. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who wrote in your wonderful questions. It's so inspiring to hear your stories, Maggie, and to kind of dip into the potential that you're offering in this workshop.
I do love it. I really love this work. I hope everyone loves it too.
I think they will. Okay, great. Well, we'll see you all on the 17th, Saturday. It's 11:30 Eastern, and there are different breakdowns of time available on the website. And I'll keep an eye out on the Facebook for any questions